Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Power Core Productions and Podcastings. I'm your host, Jerron Harrington, back to hit you another video, and today we are going to be continuing What If Issei Was the Shield Hero? High School DxD Guardian of the Shield Season 4 Part 2. As always, if you're a fan of the channel, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is Power Core Productions and Podcastings that has to come out now and in the future. Also, if you haven't already, I do want to briefly go over the announcement that I did state earlier in yesterday's video. That being that tomorrow you are going to be getting a special Saturday upload video, and that's just going to be the conclusion of the series What If Issei Was the Shield Hero. As always, I do get a little bit, sad when we reach the end of a series in particular, because usually it means that it's the end of one and the start of something new. And while I'll admit this series hasn't been as popular as other ones, mostly towards the tail end of it, it's still something that I've genuinely enjoyed writing, since this story isn't connected to all of the other ones that I'm doing on the channel right now. There's no multiversal thing going on. And while I enjoy making the multiverse type stories, it's nice to have a story like this, or like Darling in the Franxx Voltron. Something that's just a nice standalone story that I can focus and do and get unique and creative with. I've really enjoyed making this series, and I am leaving some wiggle room potentially if you guys want to see a custom season 5 or a special movie type event. If that's something you guys want to see, then I can definitely do that, so that's on the table. But if not, I'm just happy to wrap up this season, to wrap up this story, and all in all, I'm just pleased with everything and the way it's come out. So I do thank you all for your support as we are on the road to 2K and beyond. But now, without further ado, let's get into today's story. So as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Soso would reveal the plans for Kuno's mother, what the hero faction were really trying to do. They wanted to use the Nine-Tailed Fox yokai for a certain experiment, as they wished to test their limits and see what they were truly capable of. But also, he wanted to exchange a few blows with the Governor General Azazel and see what the Shield Hero was truly capable of. After all, this was the first time that the two cardinal heroes were now in existence in the same place, since the sealing of Kuroi, the Black Dragon, almost a millennia ago, during the events of the last Great War. One of Soso's comrades would use a special ability, being able to form anti-devil monsters, beings capable of holding their own against devils. Issei would take the lead, putting everyone in position and coming up with a strategy to best deal with them. For the most part, they were able to hold their own just fine, and Issei proved to be a truly effective leader in this moment. As Soso did battle against Azazel, even being able to hold his own while Azazel was using his balance breaker, truly impressing the fact that a mere human was capable of such power. He couldn't help but acknowledge Issei and his skill. A unique feature, that being of which a coordination, of putting people in position and coming up with the best strategy to win. That was truly the trademark of the shield after all. It wasn't an offensive weapon in nature, like a sword or a bow or a spear. The shield was meant to protect. However, that was often taken as a form of weakness. The shield was capable of far much more. Just as the monsters were being defeated though, one of Soso's comrades would step up to the fight. His name being Siegfried. Being a former exorcist himself, he too were capable of using special swords, although his sacred gear gave him even more of a terrifying nature, that of which allowing him to create multiple arms, thus allowing him to wield multiple swords at once, all of different kind. Holy swords, artificial swords, balance breaker swords, demonic swords, sage swords, and everything in between, all were at his disposal, truly making him a versatile and deadly foe to defeat. Even Kiba with his sword burst was barely able to hold his own, even with Zenobia helping him with Ascalon. As they continued fighting, Soso would also reveal another personal ambition of his own, that being of which wanting to acquire power, but power to become the strongest human. For so long, gods, devils, angels, fallen angels, and everything else in between, they always seemed to settle their disputes on Earth, and humans were always caught in the crossfire. However, even now, he still believed that humans were always going to be the ones that would come out on top. In short, he merely wanted to see just how far he could go. How far could one human box with the gods? But that wasn't the main issue that Issei and the others had at the moment. For starters, the real question was just how on earth was the spear even in existence? Kuroi being especially keen on this information, as the Black Dragon remembered specifically that the three cardinal heroes, along with Naofumi, who had worked together to seal him away inside of the shield in the first place, the three cardinal heroes died and their weapons were destroyed. Soso would agree that indeed the weapons were destroyed, keyword being the weapons. However, he pointed very carefully to the gemstone connected to the blade of his spear. The gemstone was the true power of the weapon itself. As long as the gemstone remained intact, the weapon could be reformed, no matter how long it took. Or it could be artificially combined with the weapon if the wielder was strong enough to make it so. As such, the gemstones were lost throughout history, no one knowing much about them or what to do with them. With the shield being the only one in existence, and now becoming the sacred gear for the Black Dragon, it was just assumed that all the other weapons were destroyed and could never be reformed. However, his holy spear said otherwise. This spear that was perfectly forged and created by Soso, it contained the power of the cardinal heroes of the spear and all that came before him. Soso, using this to its fullest extent, truly showed that he would more than likely become the greatest of all of the spear heroes who had ever existed. And coming from Kuroi, that meant a lot. However, while they already had certain business in Kyoto, there was one more matter that he did want to look into. There was word that there was another gem here in Kyoto itself. Of course, they weren't really in the best of time frames to go and find it, but they believed that when some free time came up, they wouldn't mind doing some sightseeing and see what they could dig up around here. Just then, as the fighting was continuing on the bridge, a massive Titan-like weapon would appear from out of the water. Riding alongside it would be a cute girl, looking like that of a magical girl on a flying broom. She would reveal that her name was Lafley Pendragon, and that she was a member of the volley team, and she had come with a distinct message from Volley to Soso, warning him to not get in his way once more, and that this weapon was certain insurance that he wouldn't do so. Everyone for a brief period having to turn their attention to the colossal Titan-like monstrosity right beside them, Azazel remarking that a weapon of that power hadn't been seen since the last Great War, and how on earth the Chaos Brigade managed to get their hands on it was something he couldn't fathom, seeing as how they were sealed away specifically for the damage that they caused. All the same, Soso had to divert his attention to defeating the Titan, and he was able to do so, causing Lafay to retreat in the process. It seemed as though they were going to pick up their second wind. That was until Rosvisa would stumble into the battlefield, rather drunken and still in her stupid state, making torrents of energy rain down upon almost everyone in the process. Soso, deciding that it was simply best to draw back for now, he would tell them they were going to be at Nijo Castle if they wanted to find Kuno's mother. As they left, and the fog began to dissipate, the dimensional void would start to disappear as well as they returned back to the real world, everyone concealing their weapons once again, as the humans would return, and it seemed as though for them nothing had happened at all. Once that was confirmed, everyone would decide to carry on for the day, with the distinct note that they needed to meet together as soon as possible. They met that early evening, and Azazel would go over the strategy for what they were going to have to do. Getting back Yasuko was their top priority for now, and as such, the members of the House of Grimmery and the House of Sea-Tree would be working together. The House of Sea-Tree would be on standby, while the House of Grimmery, they would be on offense. Although Saji, since he had the power of the absorption dragon, Furitura, on his side, he would be asked to accompany the Grimmery family, and as such, Issei would have to watch over him and his safety as well. Since they had some time before the mission would begin, Kiba and Issei had two very important things they needed to do. For Kiba, Azazel told him where he needed to go, but before leaving, he asked was it was something that he really wanted to do, warning that if he walked down this road, he would never be able to leave from it. This would forever change his destiny and his fate in life. But for Kiba, his destiny had already changed a long time ago, and now this was something that he knew he needed to do. With that, he would bid everyone farewell, as he would leave with a few other yokai attendants, as they made their way to a particular temple not easily found, and there, his mission would begin. But as for Issei, he asked for some time alone. He went to his room and got into a meditating stance. Once he cleared his mind, he would find himself entering into the subconscious of his shield. He would find himself in the forest once more, and it wouldn't be too hard to find Elizabeth either. The elf-like girl sitting on a tree stump nearby, still wearing her green dress as her silver hair flowed. She was surprised to see Issei so soon, but she already knew why he was here. She warned if he were truly ready to undertake such a task, telling that there was no going back once he did this. Issei nodded. This couldn't wait any longer. She understood, and they walked and made their way to the door. She warned that once he entered, neither she nor Kuroi nor anyone would be able to pull him out. She also warned if he were stuck in there forever, he'd never be able to awaken back in the real world. And knowing what was about to happen in just a few hours from now, he was going to have to really think this over. But Issei had already made up his mind. He used the key to open the door. As he did so, he walked inside, shutting the door behind them. As he did so, the door in the pathway, as well as the door behind Issei, would disappear. There was no way for him to get in and out now. He was going to be stuck here, on his own. As Issei walked through the darkness that was his own mind, he would see firsthand what truly lied within his heart. There, standing before him, would be 5 Isseis. 5 in particular, each one looking upon him, judging him. The first Issei was connected to Asya in a sense, for it had the symbol of bishop on its chest. This version of Issei was the guilt and resentment that he had for feeling in the Asya situation. It was his guilt for feeling as though he dragged Asuya into a world she never needed to be in. The guilt for letting her die. It was something that he had never truly gotten over, and something that he always felt as though it were his fault. Even though time and time again Asuya told him that this was the life she chose to live. In the end though, Issei never fully believed her. He thought that she deserved so much more, so much better than the life that he had given her up until now. And this Issei was the embodiment of that. The next Issei had the symbol for Rook, its ties to Koneko. This Issei felt as though he were inadequate when it came to Koneko in a way. Even if he tried to understand Koneko, he would never truly know what she had gone through, what she had been through her whole life. Koneko had truly been through suffering and hard times and moments, dealing with a power that she wanted to gain control over. And she had managed to do so, whereas Issei still couldn't with his own shield. The next Issei had the symbol for Night. This was the representation of Zenobia. The insecurity here lied in the simple fact that maybe Zenobia was right. This was obviously the Zenobia before she became a devil, the one that looked down on devils and such. She represented the insecurity that Issei had towards his own nature, his own existence. Could a devil really be a hero? Or was that just a contradiction in and of itself? He was referred to as the devil of the shield, although other times he would be referred to as the hero of the shield. What type of devil could be a hero? Really, in the grand scheme of things. The fourth Issei had the symbol for Queen, this being Akeno. This represented Issei's insecurities towards the fallen angels themselves. Of course, Issei never looked down on Akeno for being a fallen angel, but he couldn't deny that he had a hatred for them. Despite the peace treaty between the three great factions, he couldn't forget that it was the fallen angels that started all of this to begin with. It was Kokobile, a fallen angel who almost destroyed their town. It was Rainier, a fallen angel who killed him to begin with and killed Asuya. All the same, he wondered if deep down in his heart had he ever truly forgiven any of that? Or was it just something that he did on the surface? A lot like Akeno, a girl who could put on a fake smile to hide her true pain faster than anyone, and with much more convincing than even Issei himself. Was Issei only lying within his heart? Did he truly want forgiveness? Did he truly mean it? But the final Issei, the final silhouette, it didn't have a mark, but it glowed a distinct red. A red similar to that of Rias. This Issei represented the ultimate insecurity. An insecurity Issei had felt long before he became a devil. That insecurity being that he was just not good enough for her. He wasn't blind. He knew very well that Rias had feelings for him. But honestly, she was the sister of the Devil King, a girl born in nobility, the true definition of beauty, class, of the highest standard. Rias was above all in every regard and aspect. She had all the qualities that Issei felt he lacked within himself. He was no leader compared to Rias. He wasn't as smart as Rias. If it came to looks, Rias was 100 out of 10. Issei was the lowest of the low. What right did he have to be with her? What right did he have to love her? To feel anything towards her? He was nothing but a pawn. Sure, she might have shown affection towards the pawn, but what if that was just to make sure he did a good job? A little pat on the back, something to boost only his morale. Ultimately, for Issei in his mind, Rias gave him everything. But what did he really give her? What did he give her that was truly valuable, that meant something to her in her life, that wasn't just superficial? For Issei, it was Rias' attention, her affection. That is what kept him going. But was it the same? Did anything that Issei do, did it really matter in the grand scheme of things? These were the insecurities that affected him. The 5 Isseis surrounding him, berating him constantly, throwing all of his failures back into his face, making him relive all of his trauma over and over again. No wonder people went mad inside of here. Imagine having every mistake you ever made in your life shown to you on loop over and over again. Something designed to break you down, to show you how you were truly the lowest of the low, how you were nothing. For Issei, this is how he truly felt. Even before he became a devil, he lived a shallow life. If he had died that day when Rainier killed him, he would have amounted to nothing. He knows that. Even for his loving parents, he knew that he could have done so much better. There were so many times, so much time wasted. That's when Issei started to reflect. What was he before he had the shield? What was Issei Hyodo before he became a devil? He was a nobody. And it wasn't because he wasn't good enough. He was a nobody because he didn't take charge of his life. He could have improved. He could have done better. He really could have tried. For Issei, his ultimate insecurity was that he didn't feel he deserved any of this. The only reason he had the fame, the adulation, all of it was because of the shield. The only reason why he was even in the world that he was in now was because he was chosen to inherit the power of the Black Dragon Emperor, the shield hero. It could have chosen anyone, but it chose him. And the true fact of the matter is, it was only by chance. The shield didn't have to choose him. It could have chose anyone. He was just the lucky guy that got it. So what made him so special? So deserving of all the praise that everyone threw upon him? Honestly, sometimes it felt as though they were just making fun of him behind his back. It made him absolutely sick. Deep down, he knew who he truly was. He was shameful and he was pathetic. And the idea that he was just this great hero destined to do these things. Don't make him laugh. He knew he wasn't. He knew this wasn't his purpose, his calling. This was just the random luck of the draw. In all likelihood, if things hadn't been the way that they were, he'd be a nobody in school. He'd still be Googling and trying to peep in on girls. People like Rias and Akano, they wouldn't pay him the time of day. He would probably graduate with average grades, get an average job. Maybe he'd find an average wife if he was lucky. Maybe have a kid, grow old and die. Completely unaware of everything that was happening around him. In the end, he was truly insignificant. Because without the shield, he was nothing. But then he would hear a voice. A voice from deep within. From out of nowhere, Asya would appear in front of him, telling him that that wasn't the case. She would show all the things that Issei did not see in himself. Everywhere Issei thought he was a failure, she showed why he was truly the best. Even if Issei didn't see it, it was the little things that he did. His kindness, his compassion, his mercy, his strength, his resolve. In the end of the day, he might have only had the shield, but he put in the work to be as strong as he was. He put in the effort to get to where he had gotten. No one else had done that for him. Koneko would agree, as she appeared as well, telling Issei that when they first met, he truly had no talent. But what he gained now, his fighting prowess, his strategy, his experience, you can only gain that through hard work. Sure, he had the shield, but the shield was nothing but potential. And potential was like faith. And faith without works is dead. Akeno would attest to that. His forgiving nature, his will to never give up, that was something she loved about him. For Zenobia, when she felt as though she had nothing, when she felt as though she had no right to have any friends, Issei was there and willing. And finally, Rias herself would appear as she looked towards Issei. She told Issei that deep down, he thought that he added no value to her life. But really, that couldn't be furthest from the truth. She was only as strong as the household that fought behind her. And no one was more loyal, more willing, and more faithful than him. The 5 girls each embodied a special trait. One that Issei had never seen within himself, but they brought to the forefront. From the darkness, they drew him into the light. And before long, he would awaken. He found himself back in the forest, where Elizabeth and Croy would be waiting. They were surprised that he had made it through as effectively as he had, although Issei didn't feel all that much different. They told him that when the time came, he would know. And with that, Issei would awaken from his meditation. As he threw on his jacket, he met everyone in the lobby as they all gathered together, going over what they were going to do. As they made their way outside, Dimension Lost would appear once again as the fog rolled in over the entire city of Kyoto. Everyone would be split up into 3 groups. For Issei, he was with Kuno, while the others were also separated. Kiba had arrived back in time as well. He called Issei on the phone. He almost sounded out of breath. Issei wondered what he could have been doing that was that intense, but Kiba told him to forget it. But that for now they needed to make their way to Nijo Castle. Also, before leaving, he told Issei that they were going to be looking to him as leader. Issei promising he'd do his best. As he and Kuno traveled together through the fog to make their way to Nijo Castle, there would be one person that would stand in their way. A boy that Issei had fought before. He had the ability to use shadows, and he had his own balance breaker, shadow armor, night reflection Darth Cross. He proved to be a very troublesome foe. After all, trying to punch Shadow wasn't exactly easy, although Issei wasn't one to be deterred. Imbued, he would use the Wrath Shield and conjure up Dragon Flame, burning away at the Shadow, injuring him enough to deal in the finishing blow. Once that was done, Issei and Kuno would make their way to Nijo Castle, reconvening with the others, as the full moon shined over Kyoto City. The group now coming face to face with Soso and his team, as the battle in Kyoto was about to begin. Soso welcomed them for arriving and being rather punctual. Issei and the others not having any time for him in his games, as his group came out holding Yasuka. They demanded that they let her go. However, he had other plans in mind. They would force her transformation, causing her to turn into a full nine-tailed fox. Soso revealing that the grand plan was to use the Nine Tails as a beacon, as a way to lure out Great Red from out of the dimensional gap, and then kill him. Issei was absolutely livid at this. Great Red didn't want any problems with anyone. It lived peacefully in the dimensional gap, and there was no reason to try to drag it out in the first place. And while that was true, the hero faction had been hired for this by Orphis in the first place. Orphis wanted the dimensional gap for herself. And for Soso, the idea of potentially slaying Great Red and adding to his own power and reputation, that was something he just couldn't afford to pass up. He would give words to Gaylord to begin the ceremony, a boy who had the distinct ability to use multiple forms of magic, creating a special form of spell that would make the Nine Tails the beacon for Great Red within the dimensional gap. In the meantime, Soso's other subordinates also wanted a piece of the action. Siegfried would take his pick. He wanted to face Zenobia and Kiba. Zenobia more than willing, as she now wielded her new ex-Durandal, as the sword had arrived just in time from the church. The sword was the combination of the Holy Sword of Destruction and her original Durandal. When combined, they created a special force of power, one that cannot easily be matched. But also, another distinct feature was that the swords were also capable of dividing, going from single blade to dual wield, meaning that she could wield both Durandal and the Sword of Destruction, one in each hand, or combine them into one great sword. As for Kiba, he would take out a rather plain and average looking sword. He told Zenobia that he had something coming also, but he needed her to buy time, and he would try to back her up until then, the two of them agreeing as they went to fight. Another girl, named Nesha, would pick Irina as her opponent, as she too was a holy mage herself, and she wanted to see what the angel was capable of. And finally, the bruiser Heracles, he wanted to fight with the Valkyrie Rosvisa, while Saji, using the prison dragon Faritara at his side, they would try to deal with Yasuka and the Nine Tails any way they could, while Kuno would stay with Asya to keep her safe. In Issei, he would turn his attentions towards Soso. They would all break out into their own individual fights and battles all across the now destroyed field. Zenobia wielding her ex-Durandal, and Kiba assisting from the back, as the two of them fought against Siegfried, who used his balance breaker Ashura, creating 4 extra limbs, giving him 6 arms in total, and allowing him to wield 6 swords at a time, making him the ultimate swordsman, something that Kiba took offense to. As for Nesha, she used the holy sword Blade Blacksmith, a holy sword with the balance breaker to make a dragon made entirely out of holy swords. As for Heracles, he chose to fight like a tank against Rosvisa. The two artillery-style users, his balance breaker was Detonation Mighty Comet, that being the ability for him to create missiles of all shapes and sizes, and they went on to see who truly had the most firepower. As for Issei and Soso, their battle was that of the spear versus the shield, a callback to a fight that had taken place long ago between two others of a similar volition. For Issei, the shield proved to be effective against the spear, although the few times that he left himself open, Soso was able to attack, the spear being a holy spear, It did even more damage to Issei since he was a devil, and that was something that devils couldn't overpower so easily. Although Issei was able to get in a few solid hits of his own, even using the Dragon Slayer Ascalon shield, using the sword shield combo, once he had a free opening, he would use his shield to block before using his free hand with the sword to take off Soso's arm. Although, in that exchange, Issei left himself open for just a moment, and Soso was more than quick enough to take advantage, slicing Issei in the chest, causing his armor to break. Kuroi working to re-heal, as he had to use Phoenix Tears. And to his horror, Soso had a vial himself. Of course, he didn't get his Phoenix Tears legally, but when you've already committed as many crimes as he has, what's a few more? He did compliment the shield. It was definitely more powerful than he was expecting. The Black Dragon Emperor truly living up to his title. But of course, while the shield was strong, the spear, he thought was just simply a little bit better. The spear could be used in a defensive manner itself, but could also attack. For the shield, as powerful as he might be, the shield was only the shield. Soso would also comment that while the shield was powerful, its strongest attribute was its defense. The moment Issei tried to counterattack, it left himself open for attack, meaning that the shield was more of a liability than anything else. And then to make matters worse, Soso's comrades would arrive beside him, throwing Issei's friends at his feet. Kiba, however, was the only one able to stand once again, trying to help Zenobia, as Asya would heal them from a distance. Soso would continue to speak down on Issei, remarking that this was the inevitable outcome. Powerful as they might be, they were in the end, they were just devils, insignificant in every way, shape, and form. In the end, it would always be humans who would rise, humans who would overcome, because after all, that was human nature, to overcome those in front of them, to overcome the odds. In the end, they were just those odds. They were just the mountain that needed to be climbed and the obstacle that needed to be removed. For Issei, as he felt as though he were standing on his own, he knew he needed more power. But what could he really do at this point? As strong as he might be, in the end, a shield was only a shield. What could a shield truly do in a situation like this? It would be in that moment that he would hear a familiar voice. It would be that of Elizabeth. As she stood behind him, she told Issei to reflect on what the power of the shield truly was. To remember that power, and once he did so, to use it. Issei then began to reflect. He looked inward within himself, and as he did so, he thought that he had come to what he needed to do. He remembered all of the fights that he had been in up until now. The shield was someone that was never supposed to fight alone. While the shield was powerful, it was only as powerful as the bonds that it formed, and those that would fight beside him. Reflecting upon this, Issei would stand once more as the aura of the dragon surrounded him. If one couldn't tell, it looked as though every shield hero in history was standing behind Issei in that moment, all of them raising their shields to the sky. But behind Issei specifically, there were two. One was Elizabeth, and the other one was the most famed shield hero in all of history, the first Black Dragon Emperor. It was Naofumi, standing behind Issei. As Issei shot to the skies, I am the shield hero, the Black Dragon Emperor, Issei. I do not fight alone. When I fight, I carry and guard the dreams and the hopes of my comrades and loved ones. This is my strength. These bonds will not be broken. They are forged in the love and the hope for the future. And that is why I have the power to defeat my enemies. From in front of Issei, more silhouettes of light would form in front of him. The first would be the silhouette of Asya, and on her chest was the symbol of the bishop. Next to her was the silhouette for Koniko, with the symbol of the rook, followed by Zenobia with the symbol of the knight, and Akino with the symbol of the queen. Finally, there was the fifth silhouette that stood before them all, although she did not have a symbol of her own. But Issei could tell that it was none other than Rias. The 5 girls, the 5 beings of light, would hold out their hands, and Issei would hold up his towards them, as his true power was now unleashed. Soso's team would go in for the attack, not wanting to allow for Issei to get too powerful and become a potential threat. However, they were all repelled and blown away by the silhouettes, the girls standing firm and protecting Issei. While most of them were down for the count though, Siegfried was able to get back up and stand beside Soso. It looked as though it were going to be a 2-on-1 fight, as Siegfried, wielding all 6 of his swords, was going in for the attack, but he would be stopped in that moment, as a battered and beaten Kiba would be standing in front of him, giving off his own aura. He was holding his holy devil sword, but within that sword, at the hilt, there was a blue gemstone. Soso and Siegfried would be shocked and livid. They would yell and demand how Kiba got that. Of course, they had their own calculations. They knew that Kyoto had to have stored that gem somewhere, the gemstone for the sword hero. But how on earth did he get his hands on it, of all people? Kiba simply looked back to them and smirked. The people of Kyoto were very keen when it came to hiding private things. And while Soso was smart in many regards, he made a pretty dumb mistake by telling them how they could bring back the heroes. Once they did so, Azazel asked if it were possible for Kiba to be given the stone. As a sign of good fate, and needing all the power that they could get to bring Yasuka back home, they agreed to this, and as such, Kiba chose one of his special swords to merge with the stone, deciding that his strongest, the Holy Devil Sword, would be the one best suited for the task, as it drew on the powers of light and darkness, truly balanced in every way. Kiba had now assumed his role. Issei was absolutely surprised as well, and so was Kuroi. It felt as though he were living through a dream once again. First he thought he would only ever be with the shield, but now stood with him, the sword, and across the spear. What was next, the bow? All the same, Siegfried didn't care. Kiba told Issei to continue his fight with the spear, and he would take care of the 6 swords. The 2 of them fighting in opposite areas. Kiba would use the power of the sword, channeling it into himself. The sword's gem would take the symbol of the knight, for that was his true calling card. His speed was his ultimate ally, his sword striking as swift as the wind, becoming a blur in and of itself. While Siegfried used 6 swords, it looked like there were almost 6 Kibas at once. Were there really 6, or was he just moving that fast? For Kiba, he couldn't even tell, even if they were just after images. The fact that the after images were even able to fight showed that he was on another plane, another level of fighting. This still took some getting used to, and he could tell that he wasn't really at his full form. But for now, this was more than enough. As for Issei, the 5 glowing girls, each one in the shape and form of a girl that he knew very much, they would all enter inside of his shield. As they did so, Issei would turn to see the remaining souls of both Elizabeth and Naofumi. Issei was absolutely shocked. It was the Naofumi, the shield hero, the first Black Dragon Emperor. Naofumi would place his hand on Issei's shoulder, telling him that he had seen everything he had gone through. He had seen his pain and his loss. But that deep down, Issei embodied everything that the shield should be. Someone who could rise above his pain, rise above his setbacks. The shield was someone who never gave up, who would stand firm until the end. Something that was unbreakable. Issei was the embodiment of that spirit. As both Elizabeth and Naofumi would fade, they promised that they would always remain with Issei, as long as he remembered that the shield never fights alone. That was the moniker that they lived by. As long as Issei kept that close to his heart, then he would always remember his true power. As they faded in the distance, Issei would see the companions that had accompanied them along the way. With Elizabeth, he saw all of her comrades and everyone that fought with her. And with Naofumi, he saw all the people that stood beside him. He saw Philo, Ratalia, Melty, the Queen, the soldiers that were loyal to the shield hero, and all the other friends that he had made along the way. Those bonds were the shield hero's greatest power. And now Issei had to forge those bonds. From this point forward, the shields that Issei was able to create would be far different than they were before. As now, he had access to something even greater. While his shield numbers would be reduced, what he got in return was more than enough. From each girl, they embodied a special shield. For Asya, the Holy Cross shield, the gemstone would take the form of a bishop. For Akano, that being the Black Angel shield, that gemstone would take the form of the Queen. For Koniko, in the Sage Mode shield, that would take the form of the Rook. And as for the Dragon Slayer shield, that gemstone would take the form of the Knight. Issei would still have access to his Airstrike shield and his Portal shield, although all the other ones that he had gained along the way, they were more or less obsolete for him now. Even if he could use them, in the end these were the much more better ones to choose. But as he looked through though, he knew that Rias had entered inside of his shield, but he didn't know where she was. Although that was something he would just have to figure out later. For now, he would keep his fight with Soso. He would use his shields in coordination, using the Bishop shield followed by the Knight Shield, and then the Queen Shield. A threefold move known as the Trion, a special move that came in a set of threes. He had actually managed to deal some serious damage to So-So, and now while he was becoming more and more annoyed with the antics and everything else that was happening around him, in the end, he always got what he wanted. And now, that was even more so. As the dimensional gap began to open above them, he eagerly awaited the arrival of Great Red into this world. However, from out of the dimensional gap, it would not be Great Red that would make itself known, but rather it would be another dragon, accompanied by a certain fighting Buddha, the last person he wanted to see. His old master, Sun Wukong of the first generation, with his dragon Oolong by his side. The great green dragon flying in the sky itself as it came down towards where Issei was. The fighting Buddha being rather annoyed that now he had to deal with this troublesome student once again. Lending some aid, Oolong would go to help with Furitra, as 2 of the 5 great dragons would deal with the Ninetales. In the meantime, Kiba chose to use his sword to its fullest extent, knowing he didn't have much power left. He would use his speed, and in a quick flash, he would slice off all 6 of Siegfried's arms, causing him to keel over and fall down, although that power was a bit draining. So-So would share some brief exchanges with his master, although it became very quick and apparent that even at his current level, he was still no match for him. And it seemed as though everything else that was happening now was a lost cause. Gaylord would tell So-So that it was best if they retreat for now, since there was no point in dragging the fight out any longer if they were going to be on the losing side. And he agreed. So-So picking up his fallen comrades, they all planned and made their preparations to leave, but Issei, he wasn't going to let him off the hook that easily. As he held up his shield, the gemstone starting to glow, he wanted to get in one shot, just one shot on So-So. With a little help from Sun Wukong, the blast would be aimed and would hit So-So directly in the face, damaging his eye. At that moment, So-So's cool and calm demeanor quickly left. That hit was a hit of humiliation, and one that he didn't want to go unpunished. As he yelled out to the Black Dragon Emperor, he held his spear in the air as he began to chant, "Spear, holy spear that can pierce the gods. I use the truth ideals as the king of dominate." Before he could finish, he was stopped, his teammates warning him that using the power of truth ideals wouldn't be useful in this moment, as it was still uncontrollable and would likely only result in his defeat. So-So understood and stopped himself. However, he turned back to Issei and to Kiba. He told the both of them that they could have fun playing hero, but don't get any bright ideas. Even if the 4 cardinal heroes are to resurrect, they would never fight as one. Never again, not in this lifetime. And he also warned them that the bow was still out there and had yet to be awakened. But when it was, he would make sure that their side would be the one that claimed the bow for themselves. And then, they would even the playing field. With that, the hero faction would leave, and now the only thing that was left to do was to save Yasuka. Issei providing assistance to Sun Wukong, the 2 of them would use their power, reaching into the subconscious and allowing for Yasuka to return back into her human form, and in doing so reuniting with her daughter, Kuno. With the day now saved, and everyone having survived the encounter, The next day would come and it was time for everyone to go home. However, Yasuka, the leader of the Fox Yokai, wished to see them all off, telling that she wanted to form the alliance with them all, so as to join in the fight against the Chaos Brigade and the Hero faction, to truly bring in an era of peace, and so that Kyoto would never experience a situation that it had been in the night before. Everyone was happy and they looked forward to the future. Kuno saying goodbye to Issei as he was preparing to leave as well. Issei had come to see Kuno like a sister to him, someone very precious and someone that he wanted to protect. He now understood what the moniker of the shield was. Forming these bonds truly did give the Black Emperor its strength. It was those bonds and wanting to protect them, wanting to protect those closest to you, that could make you truly strong. And that was what the shield drew its power from. That was why it guarded the infinite, and why it shields the dream. With that, everyone would leave, and before long, they would all make their way back home. Once they were back, Issei would have to tell Rias and everyone else what had happened. While Rias was happy that everyone had made it home safe, she was still upset at Issei, for she wished he would have called. But there was also something else that they needed to talk about. They don't know why, and for Zenobia, she felt as though she were unconscious for this, but if they didn't know any better, they could have sworn that they were all silhouettes of light, and that somehow a part of their essence was now living inside of that shield that Issei had. Issei tried to explain it to them in a way, but it didn't really make all that much sense to even himself. Although Azazel would comment that for Issei, this was simply him unlocking his true potential and power, so that was the ultimate benefit for the most part. And Rias was happy to see that Issei had gotten stronger in that regard. The girls understood somewhat what Issei meant by this, and they felt honored in a sense, to be the inspiration behind Issei's power-up. Akano especially, remembering the words that Issei had said to her long ago, that when he fights, she fights with him. And now his shield was proof of that her essence, that a piece of her would always be within it, to help and aid Issei any way that he needed. It truly made her happy. It made them all happy. Although for Rias, even though she knew that her essence was in the shield, she wondered why it didn't give Issei a special shield of his own. She wondered if there was something about her that was different. Although maybe it was because she was the king, she wasn't entirely sure at the moment. All the same though, she was happy for him and for everyone else, as they were still looking forward to the upcoming raiding game that they were going to be having, going up against Cyra and his team. Issei also looking forward to the challenge, a chance to face against the Red Dragon Emperor. Cyra wasn't lost on Issei or his power either, as he was training in preparation with the boosted gear on his arm, maxing himself out to the limit to see just how far he could go. He would be given word by one of his attendants that Issei had recently gone up and defeated the Hero faction, as well as gained a new power along the way. Both Cyra and Dreg would comment on Issei and Kuroi's potential and ability, noting that they wondered how things would have turned out if Issei would have had the Red Dragon's power instead. Dreg, however, would just make the offhanded comment that in the end of the day, the boy was still a pervert, and for all he knew, he would have probably had to power up by poking a girl's breast for all he cared, and that was something he did not care for. Meanwhile, in the original Highschool DxD dimension, Issei and Dreg would both sneeze. Issei would look to his hand and he asked what that was all about. Dreg said that for all he knew, there was probably another Dreg somewhere in another dimension talking about him. Both he and Issei wondered what they were talking about. And that was that. back to the story. Issei, in the meantime, would speak to Kiba alone while the girls were still convening in the living room. Issei asked Kiba how it felt to now be awakened as the third hero. For Kiba, it felt as though it made a lot of sense. He always knew that there was something a bit different about him. He wasn't sure why, but he felt as though now this was his calling card. This was something he was meant to do. Both he and Issei would agree, though, that while they were members of the House of Grimmery, this was another matter that acquired their attention. They both agreed that the hero faction were a dangerous force that wasn't going away anytime soon. They already had the power of the spear, while they had the power of the shield and the sword. Now that only left the bow, the last remaining cardinal hero still yet to be awakened. In all likelihood, it was still stuck in its stone form and probably hadn't even been merged with a weapon. That only made their situation all the more dire. Above all else, they needed to keep their eyes on the world. Wherever the bow hero was, it was going to awaken. It was inevitable at this point. Even Kuroi was a bit unnerved. For now, there was potential that the four cardinal heroes would exist once again. And there was even more of a danger that they would be divided, just as before. And if that were true, and if a fight were to break out, then what side was going to win when it was all said and done? Both Issei and Kiba would keep this to themselves, as they set their sights on the upcoming raiding game, and the match with Syra Org that loomed on the horizon. This concludes What If Issei Was the Shield Hero? High School DxD Guardian of the Shield, Season 4, Part 2. As always, if you enjoyed today's video, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcastings that has to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video as we are going to be wrapping up the series What If Issei Was the Shield Hero? High School DxD Guardian of the Shield, Season 4, Part 3, the Season 4 finale. But as always, I'm Javon Harrington with PowerCore Productions and Podcastings. Signing off, and I'll see you next time.